Yo everyone, welcome back. Brand new Techish in the building. It is me, Michael Bahane, the CEO of Pocket and Pocket Jobs, and I am joined with
Abadesi of Hustle Crew.
Shout out to Hustle Crew. So I think this episode we kind of wanted to do some founder war stories or founder stories that we can kind of give to other founders out there. Survival stories. Yeah, just general tidbits in our experiences being entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Do you have anywhere that you want to start?
I think it's really important. I was actually thinking about this from my meditation course, but I feel like it's really, really relevant to founder life. And it also links to a video that you put out recently about going into hiding mode to like focus on your goals. And it was basically this idea of like ego versus soul.
Okay.
Like, what are the things that drive you because you see people around you doing it? Or, you know, it's almost like a vanity metric. Forbes 30 under 40. I got to make Forbes 30 under 30. I got to make Y Combinator. I got to do this. I got to do that. Versus like actual, genuine, why are you building a business? Who are you solving a problem for? What will it serve you in your life? And I just thought it would be really interesting to like reflect on that, because I think it can be really difficult, especially when you're starting out as a founder, to know if you're on the right path. Like if you're like measuring yourself by the right goals,
Right.
And you're always playing the comparison game because you're kind of forced to. Do you know what I mean? Like even when you're pitching to VCs, they're like, oh, we already invested in someone like that, or oh, we've seen that before and it hasn't worked. So I thought it might be nice to start with like, you know, this sort of reflection. How do you as a founder really start to almost like analyze your desires and prioritize your different desires and really try and like distinguish what is something that is genuinely meaningful to you and will genuinely fulfill you and make you feel like you are advancing your life in like the right direction, versus a desire that is maybe something that has been projected onto you or you know incepted into you, or that you feel is important because people make it look important, but if you actually had it, would not necessarily make you feel like your business is healthy, is growing, or whatever. Does that make sense?
This is how we rationalize not getting into Forbes 30 under 30. We're like, oh, it's all ego. Like, it's not an intrinsic goal. No, I'm joking.
I need
We didn't make it, all right? No, I'm joking. We're mid-30s. We didn't make it, all right? No, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, there's obviously like the intrinsic goal versus extrinsic goal. Like, and I think there's nothing wrong with having the goal of like, I want to make money because I want to economically provide for myself and my family. That's absolutely a great goal. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Obviously, the other goals where it's more ego, more vanity, Instagram followers, maybe if it doesn't necessarily tie into how much money you're making, or Forbes 30 under 30, or going to certain galas, certain events. Oh, I want to go to like the Rock Nation brunch, or I want to go to the GWAP event in the UK, for example. Like I've known founders talk to me about that, and I'm like, you know what, fam? Like, why don't you worry about the bottom line? Like, don't worry about the bottomless brunch. The bottom line is where it's at. Do you know what I'm saying?
Even with like team and stuff, some people are like, oh, I need to have a team of this size or a team of that size, offices
Employee
here,
size,
there, wherever.
Vanity metric completely. Yeah. And you don't want that, because once you have that, you'll be like, oh, I don't want this. Because I've done that team photo with my team. I'm like, yeah, man, look, man, like mum, dad, like, look, I got a real team. And then later on, I was like, damn, this payroll's high. Not that I lay people off because of that, but I was just like, okay, like, yeah, there's
responsibilities.
It comes with responsibilities with great power. Shout out to Uncle Ben. And yeah, so I've struggled with that, I think, in the past, where I've tapped into those kind of ego things. And sometimes ego is good. Ego has motivated me at times. And I'm also a believer, sometimes you got to take whatever motivation is there. Like I've been slighted before in the past, and I've been like, oh, you know what, I'll show them. And I ran with that motivation for as long as I could. Then eventually I had to get out of that and get into a more healthy mindset. But I ain't mad at it. It helped me.
The spite
helped me a little bit, but you don't want to get trapped in that sort of like, you know, not to get too, you know,
I think
woo-woo.
that's a draining mood.
It is draining.
An energizing mood.
It is, but sometimes like, imagine you're running a marathon. Are you going to get mad if Mo Farah's thinking, I'm going to beat this guy, I can't wait, I'm the greatest. You're like, whatever it takes at certain points. But it damages you if you stay there in the long term. You've got to enjoy the ride, because if you're not enjoying the ride, if you're just bitter, angry, driven by ego, you're going to look back and say, what was it all for? Because once you do get to quote unquote success, which I've touched a little bit, like you do think, actually, do you know what? It really is about people. It really is about enjoying my every day. It's not necessarily about this end result. Like, so I've hit a threshold where I'm like, okay, I've got success here. And imagine if I got to another threshold, which is like the ones that you see on the magazine covers, I'd be like, I know that I wouldn't feel any different, because it just, you know, it doesn't. You don't feel joyful just by being on a magazine cover. After a while, it runs out pretty quickly. But what you do enjoy are like, oh, I've got great business here. I hire great people. I work with great people. I'm passionate about the work that we do, and we make money. That's it.
I really like that. And it's interesting because this meditation, ego versus soul, that I was doing is by a guy called Corey Mascara. And he's not that much older than us, if he even is. He's like a 30-something guy. And, you know, he's both a meditation teacher, but also like a business owner, right? Like
is he the Headspace guy?
Creator. Yeah, he's been on Headspace, he's
yes.
been on Simple Habit. He's been on loads of like these different apps. So he kind of studied in a Buddhist monastery for a while. And now he's, you know, basically making a business out of mindfulness. So he teaches courses and all this kind of stuff. And one of the things that he said, like, if you're struggling to decide if your motivation or your goal is driven from your ego versus your soul, is like, think about the headspace that you were in when you decided that's what you need. Because he was like, usually when we take ourselves away from our work, so let's say you're spending time with your loved ones, or you've just been on a holiday, you've been in some kind of like community where you feel really like safe and at rest and at peace, the desires that come to you from that place are usually driven by your soul, because you're in a really healthy mindset. So you're like, you know what, I'd be happy if I just had X, Y, Z. Whereas when you are really stressed, really frantic, maybe you've been like, you know, doing sales calls and just getting rejection after rejection, or, you know, doing all these like social media posts that aren't getting engagement. And then suddenly you're like going through your social media feed and you see all the successes and accolades of your friend. And you're like, oh, if only I just had that, then I'd be so much, you know, happier. I'd feel so much better. It's like, those are usually the ones that are like coming from your ego, just in a way to kind of like protect you and make you feel like, you know, there is a place you can go where you would feel better about yourself. So I thought that was like a really good learning. But building on that, I was just curious if you kind of agree with like the dangers of comparison, because, you know, Tim Armu, another friend of the podcast, founder of Fanbytes, who exited the business, he had a viral quote that said, do you agree? Comparison is an act of self-violence.
It's so difficult because everything has its flip coin. So yes, comparison is the thief of joy, or is self-violence. But then sometimes you do need to measure yourself up to the competition. If I put my head in the sand and I'm like, la. Well, actually, sometimes I've got a benchmark. Our competitors' numbers. Like, okay, so hold on. Why are they getting 5x the reach on this post?
A little company's house scroll.
If you don't know, in the US, in the UK, you can actually view companies' accounts, all companies that exist. Helpful. In the US, private companies are private in terms of like their numbers, but in the UK, you can actually view a company account. So sometimes you've got to tap into that comparison energy, but don't stay in there for too long.
Yes.
And I think the North Star as an entrepreneur, and, you know, to quote Bezos, you've got to be customer obsessed. It's like, if I'm building something, it should be to make someone's life better, to be honest. Obviously make my life better as the owner and operator and my employees, but also, are we actually making an impact on our customers? And if you're customer obsessed as a North Star, then you'll build your business in a way where actually the competition can't really even keep up with you, or they're doing something else and you're doing your own thing because you're just, you know, working on the needs of your consumer. But sometimes you've got to tap into the comparison thing. You can't just put your head in the sand and not know what's going on, because do you know what I mean? Like, so it's a double-edged sword. You've got to just have, everything is balanced. I'll be honest with you.
It really is.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But I would say, actually, though, speaking of ego, do you feel like people end up going the VC route as a founder because of like the ego of like, oh, I want to raise, or oh, this will get me like, you know, a certain number of employees, versus the bootstrap founder route? It's not as sexy. You're not going to get in TechCrunch.
It's true.
Do you know what I mean? Do you think there's a part of it that's like, when you did it, when you were thinking VC, was it just like, was there any part of it that was like, oh, you know what, like, this is the proper way. This is the impressive way as an LSE grad to do it?
100%. I also feel that I was like really brainwashed by like how to start a startup, which, don't get me wrong, gave me so much value.
Which is the YC thing, the YC series
so this
speaker.
is like, you know, very sort of 2010s era, what YouTube, the place to go. You read Hacker News, you subscribe to the Y Combinator podcast, you watch How to Start a Startup on YouTube. And every founder in that series talking about how to grow your product, how to get your first customers, etc., how to build your team, were founders who had done the Y Combinator program. So for me, it was like, you come up with an idea, you build a pitch deck, you build an MVP, and then you apply for Y Combinator. Yeah. And if you don't get into Y Combinator, whatever, you apply for this fund or that fund or this accelerator, this incubator. Like, it was just a no-brainer to me that I would not use as much of my own money as I had to if someone else was willing to give me theirs. You know what I mean? So that was kind of like the mindset that I had. But it's interesting because there's like a two-tier world, and definitely there's status in having VC funding. And it's, again, this proximity to power, money is power. You have more cash, whether or not you are richer, because I have many friends who have had VC checks who don't own a property in London like I do, and I'm not flexing. I'm just
flex, man. Okay, what's wrong with that flex?
Let me flex, but you know what I mean?
Home owner, Abadesi in the house.
I do think it is cool that I'm like a homeowner in like one of the like biggest cities in the world when my ancestors couldn't have these opportunities. But the reason I say that is because I've been at dinner parties where people are like, oh, this partner, you know, signed us a check, and this partner at this, and this partner at this. And then I'm like, oh yeah, cool. And they're like, and what about your business? I'm like, oh, I bootstrapped. And it's just like the conversation just like
silence
literally dies. And I'm like, but what I do is harder. Like, okay, you convince some people to write you a check. That is hard. And I've been there and I didn't succeed. I was forced into bootstrapping, as I've talked about many, many times before. So I know how hard it is. But once you get that check, you've got a check. You've got a pot of cash. You've got money, liquidity to build your business. That route was denied to me. So I found another way. Credit cards, debts, loans, whatever. And I just kind of think it's so interesting that we have this 2-tier startup land where it's like you were in the VC land or you weren't. And when you, as someone who didn't take a VC check, go into that VC circle, people do look at you like, oh.
Yeah, of course. And I think a lot of that stuff is we're watching and consuming the marketing materials of venture capitalists, whether that's their podcast, whether it's their YouTube series. So then obviously that's their economic incentive to like push people down that route.
Yeah.
And then that conversation about like, you know, it just goes silent. You might as well just said that you're an accountant. It would have had the same energy. Like it was like, yeah, like, but you know what, man, it's just group thinking it. And like end of the day, like after that for what, 5, 6, 7, 8 years later, like, you know, we're happy with the results.
I've still got a company and it's like, provide impact or results. But yeah, one topic I actually really want to talk to you about, and I know it sounds like so weird to focus on, but you were talking about how Jeff Bezos is like customer obsessed. And I actually wanted to talk to you about like feedback.
Yep.
Because one of the things that I realized is, and this is why I actually genuinely believe Trustpilot has been so successful.
Yep.
Whether you sell to consumers, whether you run a content platform of some description, whether you sell services or products to business, it is impossible to be customer obsessed unless you have a consistent, proven feedback loop that gives you feedback on how people feel about what you're delivering to them, about what you're giving to them. And I think like, if I think of like 99% of the retailers that I use or any other service provider, like a booking platform or whatever, the way feedback is gathered is so unimaginative that 99% of the time, I'm not giving it to them, right? Yeah. Like a week after I bought something from you, a month after I finished an order on eBay. How was your order? How was your find? Booking.com stay. Right. Well, you know, please review this. Please rate it. Airbnb at least are clever in the sense where it's like, you can't see what your review is until you've filled in theirs. So there's an incentive for you because you want to have a good profile. But why do you think people have failed to like unlock a good way to get feedback? I mean, I think the only other thing I can think of is like when you're actually in the experience, whether it's like a workshop or I don't know, an airline or something, and the survey is done while you are there, like you're almost held hostage before you leave. Give me your feedback. But I just feel that like we talk about being customer obsessed, we talk about feedback mattering, and yet no one's really got a good process for ensuring that they have like what 90% plus response rates.
Yeah, it's difficult because I think one, customers probably don't want to engage. They're not bothered. They want to buy their product and go. But you can also look at feedback in the data. It doesn't necessarily have to be like verbal feedback. Often verbal feedback is sometimes the most misleading. You're looking at what's your churn rate? Are people rebuying? Or are they repurchasing? Are they coming back? Do you know what I'm saying? What's the repeat purchase rate? And that is feedback in itself. Then once you have that information, you can go like, okay, cool. You know, let's try to speak to a customer.
Yeah.
I've done that too, where we had a churn rate on our like enterprise product where it was like, you get annual subscription to our job board. And in the beginning, we had a bit of churn, and I was like, okay, let me see if I can get some frank feedback from people. And it was very difficult because people didn't want to be rude. And also they didn't want to move on. So I had to kind of read between the lines and just be like, okay, let me just be obsessed with it and be like, okay, what would I not like? Is it the number of applicants I'm getting? Is it this? And I had to guess basically based on certain
like what
KPIs.
Product features. Yes. Right. So there were just aspects of the product that people felt weren't delivering based on their expectations, but they didn't want to tell you. Like, I thought it was going to be this and it wasn't.
Yes, exactly. Really so I had to constantly like tweak the KPIs and see like, if we improve this number, will this help this number? And then we realized, okay, applicants, quality applicants. Okay. And it's pretty straightforward, but that's probably because as a founder, I am obsessed with my business. Whereas, you know,
also you're an engineer and it's like a product.
It's a very quick, tight loop as well between me and the product features getting built because I'm the one that's building them as well. But sometimes it was also like, we need a customer success person. We need to get, you know, when we're selling, we need to probably be like, okay, a bit more honest about like, okay, maybe this is what you can expect, not this basically, which is maybe what happened to our best clients, but it's not going to happen to our average clients. Yeah. If that makes sense. So there's things that you can do, but it's not easy. If everyone could make their customers happy, there'll be no new businesses, like straight up, right? So you rely on the fact that like people don't have the insight. So in Peter Thiel's book 0 to 1, he basically said that secrets are what make great businesses.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have that insight of being like, okay, like actually, so for example, I saw the founder of Pretty Little Thing. He's the son of the owner of Boohoo, I think, and he left Pretty Little Thing. Yeah. It's a family business. Yeah, and so he left 3-4 years ago, and now he's like, I'm coming back because basically I'm seeing that customers are not happy with the fact that we've got rid of free returns, because a lot of these e-commerce platforms are now getting rid of free returns. So I think he has that kind of understanding of, actually, I'm looking through the Instagram comments and right now we're not cooking. I need to come back to save the day because our customers are not happy, right? Basically. So sometimes it's just insight. It's not even necessarily like you got to told
read between the lines.
Yeah, read between the lines. Look at the Instagram comments and just figure things out that way.
It's hard to see the writing on the wall sometimes, though. I think even as a leader, especially as a leader, because we use a lot of like nostalgia, like to reflect on the times that we were really good. We have a lot of delusion, but I also think, you know, you talk about groupthink a lot on the podcast. Teams have groupthink. Yeah, like 100%. I've been in arguments with my team where they're just like, oh, but the client this, but the client that. And I'm like, yeah, but also we messed up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's great that teams have that dynamic where they want to protect themselves and bolster themselves and all that kind of stuff. But that can also kind of hold you back from like the brutal honesty that you need. Like sometimes you just like could have done X, Y, Z better, you know?
Yes.
And I think that's really tough.
I think one tip I saw from Bezos was that you should, in a team meeting, the CEO should always speak last.
To speak
last.
Yeah, that's good.
Because actually, if I'm going to go around and say, actually, why do you think things are not going well? If I speak first, I'm the person who's paying your check. You're going to probably just reiterate what I've said. But if I go around, yo, everyone just be frank and honest. What do you think?
Oh, like in a retro, definitely.
Then I'm like, okay, then I'll speak.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because then actually people can give me their truthful ideas. So I remember talking to like one of my top employees, like, and I was like, yeah, things ain't working right. And he was like, yeah, I thought that too. I was like, why didn't you say something to me then? Like a while ago. But at the same time, you don't necessarily want to, people are very, like hierarchical and risk adverse, and also you don't want to outshine the master, which is 48 laws of power, but forget that book. But like you don't want to do that. You don't want to outshine the master, so you're gonna just maybe kowtow to what I've said. But if you just came to me and was like, I'm gonna be frank, things are fucking up, what employee is gonna do that? You know what I'm saying? Unless you give them space to do that.
Yeah.
To know that, okay, I'm talking to the customers and right now they're not happy. Whereas as founders, we have a bias towards optimism.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't have built this, because it is insane.
Yeah.
If I told you, you know, build this company after 10 years and this amount of profits and this, you'd be like, no, I can't be done. But if you're a founder, you have that optimism, so then you sometimes can't see the decline coming at you.
Oh, totally.
And I think I looked at my numbers, 2021, 2022 amazing, 2023 yeah, and then I was like, but I was delusional, because in 2022 there was a dip and I was like, oh no, things are going to be all right. And there was a big dip.
Macro dip.
Yeah, it's a macro dip. We're going to be all right. Then in the beginning of this year, I was like, okay, we've got to fix things. We can't head in the sand moment.
Same, man.
We've got a thing. And I think for us at the moment, we've turned things around and grown back up again. But like, if I had just put my head in the sand, I was like, no, man, you know what? Like, companies want this, the things that we're providing. It's like, no, the numbers are the numbers. Like, you've got to face the facts. Hard relate.
Yeah. My company will look very different in 2 or 3 years' time.
Yeah.
Very different. Yeah, because I think adapt and survive,
Have to.
And our best years revenue-wise were 2020 and 2021. We had product market fit because, our bread and butter is bias awareness training, anti-racism training, and we had a Black Swan event where everyone felt the need to elevate their consciousness on that topic. Fast forward to the present day, we're living in a very different reality, and the value of the work that we do has declined steadily, massively, rapidly, quickly. And
not the value, the perceived value, perhaps.
The perceived value, in the eyes of like decision makers, but also like the power dynamics have shifted massively, because we are ultimately a vitamin, not a pill, right? In terms of like
painkiller. Not painkiller.
Exactly, painkiller. And so I think that if you are, selling to businesses and businesses are reluctant to spend money on anything, then whatever you are selling to them has to be something that will always be essential. And actually, you know what? I kind of wanted to ask you a bit about this, because you did a video on the Lindy effect. Could you summarize it to our listeners?
So the Lindy effect is this idea that the longer something has lasted for, the longer it's likely to last for. So a 1-year startup probably has maybe, you'd bet they might have another year in the tank. A 50-year startup might have another 50 years in the tank. It's basically this idea that probability-wise, that is what's going to happen. It's not a mathematical law to guarantee it's going to happen. But for example, if I had to put $1 million in and bury it, would I rather put it in gold or Bitcoin for 1,000 years? I'd probably pick gold, because gold's been around for 10,000 years. But then if you said to me Bitcoin or this new altcoin, I'd pick Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's been around for 15 years. So it's a heuristic to understand how long something can last for, based on precedent, basically,
Yes.
and robustness based on precedent. So
Exactly. So the reason I bring up the Lindy effect is because I want to ask you, in 2016, here I am, facing all kinds of hostility on my team as the only Black woman. I quit. I want to do something about it. I'm like, tech has a lot of bias that's unaddressed, and it's going to end up in the AI products that we rely on, and it's going to be really scary. It's going to entrench injustice. And I start Hustle Crew, and we start working with VC funds and tech companies, raising awareness of bias and talking about the need for representation. I remember I always had this line, like, imagine if tech teams, like offices, were as diverse as like a supermarket or a bus, Anyway, then we have this sort of like 2020, so many different things happen at the same time, from the pandemic to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, the BLM movement, all these kinds of things. Also to the economy, right? Where there were just more jobs than there were people to fill them. Anyway, fast forward to now, I guess my question is applying the Lindy effect to anti-racism.
Right. As in,
how
like,
do you feel
as a
about
viable
it?
business, or do you mean?
Yeah, but even just like as something that businesses will care about, right? Because businesses, historically, HR is relatively new as far as businesses go. Do you know what I mean? Like a business was very much, we produce things through labor and sell them to a market, right? So, you have HR as a function to sustain the labor force, workforce, whatever. Then only in like the most recent times, the last few decades, has HR evolved into things like learning and development, professional development, and now evolved into like, culture as far as representation, diversity, inclusion, neurodivergence, blah, blah. So what I'm saying is like applying the Lindy effect to people operations, HR functions within a business, like what will survive and what will die.
I mean, it's not like a magic 8 ball where I can tell. I think what you'd have to look at is
No,
basically I think in terms of like anti-racist training, obviously we can say that there was obviously like a giant spike. And the spikes come down, so that would indicate that potentially it's not necessarily a long-term endeavor potentially within corporate America, just based on the fact that we've seen that spike and that decline. Whereas you might say, okay, the other functions of HR have been around for 20 years, so I can imagine in 20 years time, do you get what I'm saying, that would still be around. Whereas
sexual harassment.
Yeah, exactly.
Pivot.
Right. So as a business owner, I would probably, my perspective with you has always been like, I would start to leverage my other skill sets, in the sense that like the Lindy effect would show you that people have always looked to basically be better managers, better salespeople, better this, better that. And that's always existed because people want to make money. And that product or service that you currently exist should always still exist. But then if you want to kind of continue to scale up, you probably should leverage those other things which are more Lindy.
Like Play School.
Like Play School. What is Play School? How's it going?
Play School's going well,
Actually, this is going to come out. This is going to come out in like 2 weeks from now. So basically,
I don't even know when that is actually. Yeah, that's great.
So okay, cool.
Yeah,
it's just for
so Play School Accelerator. I'm trying to take all of the lessons I wish I learned sooner as a founder, but also all the lessons that I learned as a VP, using my 6-figure budget to bring in founders, their products, their services, to equip entrepreneurs with the skills that they need to take their business to the next level. So we cover everything from, the sales journey and how you can optimize that, especially if you're a B2B founder, to close long-term partnerships sooner, trying to understand like how decisions are made on the other side of the table, because I was in a privileged position to do that. But we're also going to talk about like the mindsets and the habits that like keep you motivated, and also all the other things that are so important as a founder, especially if you're from the global majority. Talking about building your personal brand online, creating alternate sources of revenue as you build your business, building that personal brand, one-on-one coaching with me, live masterclasses, and a community of like-minded founders kicking off on Monday, the 30th of September, so early October. But applications are open now and spaces are limited. So if folks want to apply, get involved. hustlecrew.co/playschool.
So we'll leave it at that. Thank you everyone for listening. That's been this week's Techish. Hopefully it's been helpful and insightful to founders and non-founders alike. And we will catch you next week at TechishPod on Instagram, and watch our YouTube as well if you want to see us in the flesh. Peace.
Bye.